and unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning, everyone, here in Canberra, and good afternoon to our global Sangha in California and Oregon today, and Sydney. We're having a Zazenkai today, an all-day sit today, which is a wonderful, precious gift to be able to sit together quietly in a beautiful place. Last week, we talked about confidence in ourselves, confidence in the Dharma, and confidence in now. And I wanted to continue a little bit with that theme and speak about confidence in gradual practice today. The benefits of gradual practice sometimes are quite obvious early on in practice. We might find that regular meditation practice, we notice that our reactivity is less. Actually, often very early in practice, we actually notice just how much disturbance there is in the minds. Often initially, in fact, it's kind of a bit of a shock to the system. But after we've been sitting for a while, we start to see just the benefits in our ordinary life, the way we relate to people, and even a little bit, if we're fortunate, in the way we relate to ourselves. And in some ways, I think that's what brings a lot of people to practice in the first place, is that they want to, they do want to change the habits of their minds. And maybe they want to change some of their behaviors. But whether that's what brings you to practice, or whether it's a desire to understand the nature of things, we do start to feel the benefits of practice. And we can just enjoy those benefits. We can enjoy noticing that, like often what happens is the changes are subtle and we don't really notice them until something happens that we respond to in a way that's different to how we have habitually responded to things in the past. And then we go, oh, that's interesting. I wasn't as defensive, or I wasn't as combative. I wasn't as suspicious. Whatever our mental habits might be. So sometimes we just have little moments where we get to see the benefits of gradual practice. And gradual practice is just our zazen, our meditation practice. And it's also our capacity to hear the teachings and study the teachings and reflect on the teachings. That's a gradual process too. And the more we feel those benefits, the stronger our confidence becomes in both ourself as a practitioner and in the teachings and in the practices. And then that confidence has a kind of like a positive feedback effect, where that gives us more confidence to practice maybe a little more. Maybe to sit Zazen daily rather than periodically, or to sit consistently with Sangha, like we do in the mornings here at the moment, which we do on Zoom, or to take up a study with the teacher, to study at home, to take on roles within the Sangha, such as flowers on the altar or being the Don. And although it's enjoyable to feel those positive effects of practice, after a while we actually are glad for those positive effects for others more so than for ourselves. It becomes the experience of, I am glad that I can do what I once couldn't do, or that I no longer do what I once used to do, because that's better for other people, that's beneficial to other beings, that I can now do something that I couldn't before, or that I no longer do something that I did before. I want to describe a metaphor that I find very helpful, and I'm just hoping it won't scare you. It's a bit intense sounding, but anyway, I shall share it anyway in case it is beneficial to you. There's an ultra marathon runner, a woman named Courtney DeWalter, and when you do long distance running, almost always you go through a point while you're running where it gets very hard. It can be like physical pain. Sometimes your feet feel like they're in a vice, or knee pain or hip pain, or it could be blisters. Often it's just this overwhelming fatigue where you think, I can't possibly keep going. And so Courtney describes this as the pain cave. And what I love about this image of the pain cave is, rather than thinking, uh-oh, here I am in the pain cave, I hope it doesn't last long, her attitude is, how wonderful, the pain cave has arrived. And then I am going to, with my chisel the walls of that pain cave and make it just a little bigger, so that there's more space for me to be at ease with the pain. And I love this image. I quite often find myself in my mind going, chisel, 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 chisel. And we only have to chisel a little bit. We don't have to be heroic. We don't have to chisel out massive, big chunks from the pain cave. Because actually what happens with running, if you've done long distance running or any other forms of these sort of intense physical sports, is the pain does go away, unless it's an injury. But if it's not an injury, it kind of shifts, and it's a remarkable thing. You can go into this pain and think, how could I possibly keep going for the next 2 hours or however long it might be? And then it just goes away and you can keep going. So we can apply this idea to our Zazen and to our ordinary life. That we go into moments with Zazen. This often happens, it may happen to some of us today, where it just really hurts physically, possibly in the knees or in the ankles or the hips. Or sometimes it can be a little more mental. It could be just tiredness. You just feel like you're nodding off, which is kind of quite unpleasant feeling, to have that nodding off feeling. Or restlessness, like just wanting it to be over. Or doubt, like, why are we doing this? I've got so much to do at home and here I am just sitting here. So a doubt. So if we can think of it this way, here's the pain cave. This happens. I'm going to just breathe into it just for a while and just see what happens. If we can really relax and breathe into it, it often just, whatever that difficulty is, just dissolves. Just sort of miraculous. It just dissolves. And if it really doesn't dissolve, well, then that might mean, if it's something physical, that you really need to move, or you might even need to lie down. And if it really doesn't shift psychologically, then it might mean you need to talk to the teacher about what's going on in your mind, or get some advice that these particular thoughts that are very painful keep recurring, might need some professional support. So we have to be thoughtful with this image. So you can try it out if you like and see if it's a helpful image for you. Recently I came across the teachings on, they're called the Bhumis, the 10 stages of a bodhisattva. And they're not something that I have studied a great deal, but I thought it might be nice to go over them because it's a description of the gradual way in which our practice deepens. But before going through the 10 stages or the 10 lands, 10 Buddha lands, I'd just like to read a little bit from Tenshin Roshi's book, The Third Turning of the Wheel. And here he's talking about sort of stages of practice. The reason the Buddha mind is being analytically divided into different dimensions or areas of concern is that there are different types of ignorance. Because there are these different types of ignorance, there are different practices to deal with them and different stages of the path. These ignorances are necessarily dealt with in a certain order. You can't deal with the ignorance of the 10th stage at the first stage. You have grosser ignorances to deal with first. And when you hear about them or read about them, you realize that even the grosser ignorances may take a long time to cure. However, this is the realm of bodhisattva practice. So we accept this difficulty because dealing with ignorance is our course of study. Practice is not linear, but there is linearity within it. Stillness isn't linear. You being you isn't really linear, and it isn't really non-linear. You being you allows linear and non-linear perspectives. We are sentient beings and we live in a world that includes both linear and non-linear. That's our life. Part of what happens when you become yourself is that you allow all of this to be. And then he goes on to use a metaphor here about how we work with ourselves in a gradual way. When you sand a wooden table, it's okay to start with really fine sandpaper, but that might not work out very well. If you start with rough sandpaper, you can smooth out the gross roughness more quickly. However, as you smooth it out, you notice that there are scratches that you couldn't see before. Then you use finer sandpaper. And with finer sandpaper, you see even finer scratches. Then you use even finer sandpaper. And the finer the sandpaper you use, the more subtle are the scratches you discover. You could start with fine sandpaper and just keep sanding and sanding, and you might eventually reach the same result, but you might not. And so when Reb talks about ignorances here, In a way, you could say that's a shorthand for our mistaken views, and our mistaken views often are related to attachments and aversions. They're the two directions we tend to go in. Attachment to the idea of ourself, aversion maybe to the idea of ourself, but more commonly attachment to the idea of ourself as a separate entity. And so I think this rougher sandpaper, slightly finer sandpaper, this is kind of trust in gradual practice. A little bit of Zazen, a little bit more Zazen, maybe a Zazenkai, maybe a retreat, maybe a solitary retreat, maybe a practice period. Practice period is like a 3-month intensive, which we don't have much opportunity for in Australia at this point, but is quite common in the United States, and hopefully we will get there at some point. And this sandpaper image we can also use for how we relate to people. That initially we might simply want to make sure that we're not so reactive, for example. That's all we're aiming for, maybe with a particular person or persons that we tend to be reactive with. So maybe all we're aiming for initially is, can I be a little less reactive? And then we notice that we can be. It's very encouraging. And then we can start using finer sandpaper. Could I maybe not even be not so reactive? Maybe I could be even a little humble, let's say. Or maybe I could even be complimentary to this person who's a little harsh with me in an authentic kind of a way, not in a affectatious sort of a way, but genuine. Seeing the good in that person that maybe is not seeing the good in you. That's fairly fine sandpaper. we can do that. That's great practice. So these 10 bhumis is Sanskrit for land, these 10 lands of Bodhisattva. The first 6 are parallel to the 6 paramitas, which we've talked about over the last year or so. So I'll go through them, just say a few words about each of them. So the first land is called the land of joy. And this is joy at entering the path. I think a lot of us have that feeling after we've started to practice. We start to feel a joy that we're part of practice, that we're part of this wonderful tradition. With all these ancestors that go back, all these people practicing around the world with the intention of being of benefit to other beings, and with the intention of understanding the nature of things. There's a bird out there that looks like it's listening. It's just staring right into the sendo up on that branch. Can you see it up there? It was just staring right down here. That's funny. So joy, it's called the land of joy. Joy at entering the path. There's arousing the thoughts of enlightenment. So really developing confidence in ourselves that we can wake up. It's not something that can just happen to other people. It can happen to us, that we can wake up to the nature of things. And in this land of joy, the virtue of generosity is cultivated, which is the first paramita. So my thoughts about this is for us to have confidence that we're worthy to enter this path, and we're worthy to feel this kind of joy, and that we're capable of awakening. We're capable of being generous. Because to be generous is a kind of a strength. In a way, there has to be a surplus. Whether you're giving something like a material thing, there needs to be a surplus that you can give it. Or if you're giving time, or if you're sharing the teachings. Or one of the particular types of giving that I like is the giving of fearlessness. If we can be fearless when others are fearful, it's an incredible gift to give, a gift of fearlessness. And I think when we practice generosity, it kind of empties our ego identification somewhat, because it's a unifying thing to give to others in whatever way we give. It shifts the focus to others, but others not as separate from ourselves. The second land is called the land of purity. The Bodhisattva perfects their discipline. They are free from lapses in discipline. And this discipline deepens samadhi, which is stillness and peace. And when it says free from lapses of discipline, each of us needs to determine where our line is at this moment in terms of how much we discipline ourselves. And the discipline might be to rest. Sometimes that's a discipline. I've been doing too much, I need to rest today. That might be the discipline we need to exercise. So discipline is subtle. Or it might be the discipline to put in just that little effort, chisel a little bit of that pain cave. That might be the discipline. And it's up to us to work these things out. Nobody can do it better than ourselves, really. But we can seek advice, and we can ask for advice. And from the perspective of confidence, we can develop the confidence in our judgment about what is good discipline. The third land is called the land of radiance. In this land, the Bodhisattva gains profound and deep insight into impermanence, one of the central teachings of Buddhism. And with that understanding of impermanence comes patience, the third paramita. And you can see how that makes sense when we understand that everything is impermanent. We can be patient because everything's going to change, rather than thinking, oh my God, this is a terrible thing. And we often react as if this terrible thing will last forever. The terrible things don't last forever. And wonderful things don't last forever in the material world, in the world of appearances. So we can be patient with difficulty, and we can also be patient. It might sound strange, but we can be patient with the positive things. Oh yeah, here's this praise. That's okay. We don't need to hook on to the praise. We can just be patient with the praise. This too will pass, as we've heard many times and seen many times with famous people. Very great praise, and then come crashing down. Must be extremely painful to come crashing down from so much praise. Wouldn't really want to wish that on anybody. So we can develop patience with ourselves and our, maybe you could say shortcomings, our temporary shortcomings, our habitual patterns and habits. We can be patient with them, patient with other people's idiosyncrasies that we might find difficult. We can be patient with them. And we can be patient with circumstances. Sometimes things just don't go the way we want, quite often actually. But when we don't want too strongly, then it actually isn't that often. But when we do want things very particularly, then quite often they don't go the way we want. And we can be patient with that. The fourth land is called the blazing land. And it says, more delusions are burned off and greater wisdom arises. And energy arises, virtuous exertion, an effort that is fueled by the inner stillness cultivated in Zazen. So this is the fourth parameter, sort of energy or vitality. Virtuous exertion, I like that. So the more wisdom we, I don't know if acquire is quite the right word, the more wisdom that we is revealed already there within us. The veils of delusion have been thin veils of delusion are slowly being shed and the wisdom is allowed to shine through. The more of that wisdom that shines through, the more energy we have. The more virtuous we can be. We have energy for that virtuous action, virtuous thought. The next is land extremely difficult to conquer. This is a stage where confidence in one's nature and confidence in Zazen deepen, and one is absorbed in meditation in order to intuitively grasp the truth. So it's interesting, this is called the land extremely difficult to conquer. And it's really referring to mindfulness and Zazen. So the fact that we sit Zazen, that we take up this posture of the Buddha, this mudra of the Buddha, just that in itself is a wondrous thing. I think maybe one of the reasons people often have positive associations with Buddhism, even if they know nothing about it, is that what they've seen is these statues, just the Buddha sitting like that. And we can see just something in that image of sitting this way, with the body relaxed but alert. Something very wholesome about it. It's very present and it's very non-harming. At the very least, that's what it is, present and non-harming. It's a little bit like deep listening. When we really listen well to someone, we're not harming them, we're not actually doing anything particularly, but somehow it's incredibly beneficial to be very present to reality, to be very present to whatever's in front of us, to do no harm to it. And we have the story of Shakyamuni Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree. And in that story, there's a part of that story, a little bit like the pain cave, where it got really, really difficult for the Buddha under the Bodhi tree. Actually, I hadn't really put that together just then. But it got very difficult for the Buddha under the Bodhi tree. Mara was coming forward and tempting him with all sorts of things, and his hand touches the earth. And it passed. That touching of the earth meant that very difficult land to conquer, that difficult time under the Bodhi tree passed for him. He was able to stay with it, and it passed. So we can have that image for ourselves. Land extremely difficult to conquer. And conquer maybe is a bit of an intense word too, but we can do that. It's not reserved just for others. Although these 10 bhumis are often seen as progressing over many, many lifetimes, traditionally they're seen that way, many lifetimes to move through the 10 bhumis. And I think that's really respectful to think of them that way. But we can also think of how many moments in just a life there are. There's just millions and millions of moments in a life that are opportunities for us to practice. So many lifetimes, many opportunities, even in one life. The 6th bhumi is called the land in view of wisdom. In this, the Bodhisattva recognizes that all dharmas are free of characteristics. Free of characteristics, we've spoken about imputations and the effect of applying language to our experiences and how that has the tendency to make things seem very solid. There's a lot of teachings in the mind-only school, the Yogacara school, on examining how things are actually free of characteristics. So the Bodhisattva recognizes that all dharmas are free of characteristics, transcends discriminating thought, comprehends nothingness, perfects the virtue of wisdom, prajna. And then I've just made a note here that as we gain confidence, we're willing to see that whatever thoughts we have, they are not reality. This is such an important practice for us to do, to notice what our thoughts are and know that our thoughts do not touch reality. They are interesting, they are useful, they may be harmful, but whatever they are, they do not touch reality. It's incredibly liberating to understand that our thoughts don't touch reality. And we learn to relax with this, and rather than feeling unstable and insecure, as one might imagine, we just develop a real comfortability with this groundlessness, a real comfortability and a humility with knowing that we don't really know anything about what's going on. And the 7th land is called the far-reaching land. At this point, the Bodhisattva is skillful in means, upaya, and has gained great knowledge, allowing them to lead others on the path of enlightenment, responding to the unique abilities and limitations of beings. It is said that a Bodhisattva in this realm becomes transcendent and can manifest in any conceivable form as best benefits beings. After passing through this level, falling back into delusion is no longer possible. I like that thought, that there is a point in practice where falling back into delusion is no longer possible. And where it says here that the Bodhisattva can manifest in any conceivable form as best benefits beings, we could see that as manifesting in totally different physical forms, And we could also see it as just responding skillfully in each moment to what's needed, being able to adapt in any moment to what's needed. Someone might need a little bit of kindness, or someone might need a little bit of firmness, or someone might just need a little bit of encouragement, or little bits of limits being set, whatever it might be, or in relation to ourselves, to be able to change moment by moment to what's needed, to what's beneficial. The eighth land is called the immovable land. The Bodhisattva is no longer disturbed by anything. Isn't that great? Imagine being no longer disturbed by anything. All their attention is to benefit others, and there is no disturbance whatsoever. Buddhahood is certain. The ninth land is called Land of Good Thoughts. The wisdom of the Bodhisattva is complete. They know the nature of all dharmas and expound the teachings effortlessly. And the 10th land, land of Dharma clouds. All understanding and the immeasurable virtue is realized. Examples of these bodhisattvas are Maitreya and Manjushri. And we have a Manjushri on our altar there. So just in summary, the sudden insights we have and sudden realizations, sort of sharp and brilliant, and are held up a lot in our tradition, wonderful stories of awakening. But the gradual path is a very, very wonderful path as well. It's quiet and subtle. And the two go together beautifully. So it'd be good for us to have confidence in this gradual path, confidence in ourselves that just keeping with our Zazen, maybe studying a little bit and practicing doing the best that we can in terms of our ethical behavior. And just keeping at that, keeping on doing that, really trusting that everything that we do that with this positive intention has a positive effect. We don't know when always, it's not always obvious. Which is why it's nice when those little moments happen and we see ourselves responding in a more wholesome way. We realize practice works. So we'll finish there, and we won't do questions or comments today because we're in Zazenkai. But after we finish with the closing chant, we can all get up together and do some bows. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become